Welcome to the Come to the Table podcast, a place where real women have real conversations with and about a real God. Learn more online at graceconnect.com/table. There you will find helpful things like our weekly devotionals, as well as links to our exclusive Facebook group, our YouTube channel, and our playlist on SoundCloud. Now grab a cup of coffee and join Melissa, Amanda, and their friends at the table.
Hello and welcome to Come to the Table. Today we have Brandi Clark, Amanda Turnbull, and myself, Melissa Weber, and we are going to be talking about the struggle is real. That's what we've been talking about all month. And I just have to say the struggle is real. Awesome. Well, welcome, ladies. Shall we open up in prayer?
Absolutely.
Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, we laugh when we say the struggle is real, but you know all too well how true that is, that us being in this world, this fallen and broken world, that the struggle really is real, but that you have for us something so much greater and just a better way and a better plan, and it's more than we could ever hope and imagine. And so I just want to praise you and thank you today for that plan and for your sovereignty, your all-knowing, your all-being, your all-presence, your unchanging. Just you are who you are always from before time began, and we just praise you for that. So I ask that your guiding hand would be over our hearts and our minds and our words today as we come and sit at the table with you, the table that you've prepared for us. And I just pray that each one of us and everyone listening would just be blessed by what you have for us at this table today. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Well, I wanted to, starting where we ended with our devotionals, Brandi wrote, it was great. I happened across it. I totally forgot it was Tuesday since it wasn't my turn to write. I didn't have to pay attention to the days. And then I was scrolling through Facebook and I was like, oh, come to the table. And it was great. And what I liked about that was getting to sitting on this side of the table. You would think that, I know what's coming up. I know what we're going to be talking about. I know we're going to be posting something.
We have our stuff together.
Yeah. We have our stuff together. And
none of it
It's so not true. Which is how we ended up on this conversation in the first place, that the struggle is real was out of conversation of struggling and being able to come alongside each other, which is what Brandi wrote about, which I thought was so great. But it got me thinking about, so I guess I have a question about that, because you talked about having someone, like having your tribe. I guess that's like a hashtagable word these days, your tribe, that you can be real with, be honest with, share your struggles with. And to me, it seems like, I don't know if it's easier to share with somebody, if it's easier to be the person to share with. So I guess that was my question. Like, what do you think on that?
I feel like a lot of times you don't want to be the one who has the problem. You want to be the one who has all the answers. And so it's really hard to be honest and vulnerable and say, I'm struggling with this. And it's kind of funny, like other people will put their struggles out there, and that's fine. But we don't want to put our own struggles out there. And I think there's a lot of pride that goes into that. But like what Brandi was saying, like you need to have someone that you can be honest with, and more so, you need to have someone who you can be honest with that's going to tell you when you've gone too far.
Right.
And you need to either let it go or, whatever, and help you be able to move past it, because there are people in my past I've been able to be honest with, but then we just sit and wallow in our...
You live in it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I think online sometimes people will start to share their struggle, but then they back off a little bit, and then it almost becomes like a humble brag because you're struggling, but you don't really want anyone to know, so then you lose that transparency.
Right.
Because you don't want to be completely honest. And I understand people aren't going to want to be completely honest on Facebook for the whole entire world.
Or do I think they should? Like, I think that's, I'm going to be a friend with somebody when they're like, they've dumped this volcano of what's going on in my life, and you're like,
That should have been a journal.
I want to comment, but like, yeah, and so I guess that's where I was more in the like, I don't know that I was always good at being like the sharer, but I think because of a lot of my struggles, I've gotten accustomed to probably oversharing my struggles a little too much, or my coping mechanism for sharing my struggles is my sense of humor. So I very funnily will tell you that my life is falling apart, and you laugh and I laugh, but I was really being serious. Like, that was my coping mechanism. If we can just laugh about it, even though you really have no idea what I'm talking about, then everything's okay and I can make it through. So, but yeah, that's really where I got to, was how do I feel like we should always have somebody that we're able to go to, but also have people that are coming to us too. And I think when we sit in groups, especially, I think it's maybe the Christian church culture that we meet together as women more often and discuss things. And then when people do share, that internal struggle inside where we judge and compare. So that was really the topic I wanted to get to, was that comparing. But I thought your post led right into it, with like, how do I get comfortable, one, sharing, but how do I also stop my comparing and my judging to be that person for somebody?
Well, and I think, like Brandi hit the nail on the head. We are, especially online, you share a struggle, but then you back up and you cover it up. So then it becomes like, oh, such a hard morning, but look at how, and then it becomes like a humble brag. And I was talking to my sister-in-law the other day, and she has two little. So she is in that, I have toddlers, I have a 4-year-old, and so we all know how 4-year-old girls can be. There's, And so she was really struggling because she's like, this is really hard. Like, this is really hard. And it's that realization that, yeah, it's hard. And I got to thinking, like, when I was at home with my kids, even though they're grown now, but when I was living in that, you do get to a point where it's like you hate your house because you're stuck sitting there with your children, and you hate everything. Yeah. And then you
closing in.
Later, you hate that couch.
And then you start to feel that guilt of, I need a break. I need to get away from my children. They are driving me crazy. But then you start to feel like a terrible mom. And online, if you look at it, especially in the Christian community, anything out there for Christian moms is, look, I made this homemade whatever, and then we're doing this elaborate craft, and then everyone laid down and took a 3-hour nap, and we all did this, and it makes it seem like, what is wrong with me that this mom is finding so much joy in the fact that her kid, and oh, they helped me bake cookies, and it was such a
we labeled our cereal.
At that age, I would not let my kids in the kitchen. I'm like, get out of here. This is the one space I have. But is it covered in toys and Play-Doh right now? But you either have that, or on the flip side, you have the people who are honest and are like, these tiny creatures are driving me crazy. But then it's all worldly. So it's like, do I really want to follow the Christians who make me feel like I'm a terrible mom, or do I want to become a day drinker?
Right.
There's really no in between. And that's kind of, I think that's where, as Christians, we need to get to that point where we have to have that in the middle. We have to be honest and say, you know what? There's nothing wrong with that certain phases in your child's life that they are not your favorite creature. And that's okay.
It's okay.
It is okay that when your husband comes home, you're not just like, oh, sweetheart, I am so thankful you're here.
Little bells go off. Here's your dinner.
That is okay to not feel that way.
Right.
But it's also not okay to be angry and bitter and day drink.
Exactly. Or get to that point of resentment where now it's like, well, you're gonna be gone all day, I'm not gonna do this. Or,
exactly.
And then, there's definitely an area of balance.
Yeah.
Well, and that's where honest discipleship comes in, because I've been discipled in a way where it was hold everything in. You better make sure it looks all perfect, and you're sweet and kind, and we know that is not my personality. So that was super hard for me, because then it was even worse. I'm not a good Christian woman because I don't operate like this.
Well, I think it leaves you feeling like there's no place for you,
Right.
and that's not the gospel message. That's not what the church's message should be. That's not what our message as Christians should be. That there's no room for you. There is room for you, and you belong. And God created you for a purpose and a plan, and to belong. So, yeah.
Well, and I think because the three of us would have never walked into this building and been like, those are my people.
Right.
Never.
Yeah.
We don't match.
Right. In fact, I mean, I might have shared this story before I come to the table, but I mean, I think it is just a good example of how we got here. That I went to a Bible study, and we are talking about comparison here, and that's what really all of this. One of the things I did learn out of this struggle series was where it stems from comparison. Mm-hmm. Like how many of my struggles are really because of my comparing either my insides to somebody else's outsides, or my outsides to somebody else's outsides, or something. And especially in ministry, and I want to do that ministry, but I'm stuck, doing this ministry. People feel that way in the church. But I went to a Bible study. I went to only one of that Bible study, the No More Perfect Moms. And day one was about comparison. And I sat across from Brandi, and like a jerk, I called her out, and I was like, I compare myself to people like Brandi, little Miss Perfect over there, always dressed from head to toe in her perfect little outfits, and my life is falling apart, And she so kindly looked at me, and she's like, oh, no. If I did all this, there's a whole lot back here that's not done. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever, lady. I don't know you. I look at you, and I mean, that was not nice of me. I've asked for forgiveness about that, but sometimes I can't believe what kind of a jerk I am. But and in a Bible study, so there you go.
Yeah,
but
that's transparency.
Transparency. But the next day, this lady here sends me a picture of her house, and she's like, I'm dressed head to toe, but here's my mess. Oh, she was real. Like that was like one of those moments that just stops you when you come into contact with somebody who's willing to be transparent and real. And I had not really experienced that, I think, in the church before that moment in a way that I've definitely had women be transparent with me, but not someone that I was in a place of like comparing and judgment of. So it was like one of those moments, but here we are, so many years later, and it was because of that kind of a situation. I know you guys have a similar story, like we might not have ever really gotten to know each other if we hadn't had that.
Right. Well, and that's where the real relationships come in, and you have to be honest, because you're never going to have that real relationship if you're holding back.
Right.
And I understand you're not going to walk into a Bible study and be like, here it is. Right. Some people might, but not everyone, and that's why we have to have, it's all relational.
Right.
Or it doesn't work. And that's why there's no 1, 2, 3, you're discipled. Right. Because that'd be really nice.
Yeah. And then having grace for each other. I think that's where I struggle a lot with judgment and being judgmental. But I think there's having that grace that you don't know what's behind the doors in that person's life, and being. And the other thing that God really brought to my attention was He created us in His image first, before anything else. Like step one, created in God's image. And so there's nothing that we can do of ourselves. Like we were created that way. And then everything else is after that. Yeah. And so if everybody's created in God's image, and it's not something that we can work for, earn, can do anything about, ever had any ability to do anything about, there needs to be grace for other people, and just understand that they were created in God's image. They are a creation of God, and God loves them very much. Who am I to stand in a place of judgment? But I think that comparison can be very detrimental to our well-being, and it definitely causes a lot of struggle. What do you think about?
Well, I think, there's something that you said, and it just kind of made me think of, like, one thing that my granny used to tell me when we were growing up is, because I hung out with my granny all the time. And my mom worked, and so, we hung out with granny. And she would always tell us, like, we would go to the store or whatever, and someone would be super rude. My grandma was always just, like, the most kind person to everyone. And she always used to say, like, you never know what someone's day was like. You never know if they left their house and it was absolutely awful, and it was everything it took for that person just to go to work that day. So if that checker at the store was rude to you, you don't know how many rude customers they had before you.
Right.
And having that grace, that, like, we don't know what goes on behind closed doors. We don't know. And that's my biggest prayer through all of this. I hope everyone who's listening realizes if you comment, if you hit subscribe on our YouTube channel or on our SoundCloud account, like, we're praying over you by name. Like, we care about you. If you join our Facebook group, we're going through who is on our group, and we're praying over you constantly. And as I'm praying over these women, I've been praying this month, like, God, just help them have one person. And it's not that you have to, spill your guts about absolutely everything and be like, okay, you're my person, so let's sit down and I'm going to tell you all my deep, dark secrets, but have one person that just, what is your struggle right now in this moment that you can text, you can call and just say, I'm struggling. And then, like last month, you said, help,
I'm on the Titanic and I'm sinking.
And we all were like,
over your shoulder. Oh, there you are. You're sinking too. Okay.
Yeah.
You text the wrong people.
Yeah, and that was funny. There was so much comfort in that, knowing that, like, I was having a horrible day.
Yeah.
And when you text me in that moment, I'm like, how am I going to help her? I don't know. But then it was like, as I thought about it, it was like, you know what? At least she's having a bad day. I'm having a bad day. We at least can pray for each other.
Right.
And
there's comfort in
and there's sometimes where you don't even have to say, what it is specifically. Just be like, I'm having a bad day. Can you just pray for me? I'm having a bad day.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what we don't have to fix the problem. Because that's where it comes in, is because I really can't fix.
No. Well, and that's what's so funny is I think in that moment, like, I was like, I didn't really know what I was expecting to get back, but I think if I really thought about it, I wanted you two to come over to my house and be like, it's okay, buddy. We're going to leave our little organization fairy wands and everything's going to be perfect. And I think that's honestly really what I wanted in that moment. And that's not what I got, but what I got, because it was honest, because it was real, because it was honest and it was real, and it's what I don't even know how to describe it, but it was exactly what I needed in that moment. Mm-hmm. I didn't need somebody to come and fix my problems, and I didn't need anybody to have a pity party with me about my issue, whatever I had going on that day, even though it's probably nothing compared to me. And it was probably the silliest little thing, to be honest, but and I don't know, like, I didn't need any of that, even if I thought that's what I needed, and I didn't even need somebody to say, pull up your bootstraps and just get back at it, I didn't need that.
Acknowledgement.
Yeah.
I was having a great day, like, oh, it's okay, last week sucked, but it's just the almost confirmation of, you're not crazy.
Right. You're okay.
And I think that's the biggest thing is we convince ourselves, I'm the only one having this problem, and if I verbalize it, they're going to think, A, I'm either a horrible Christian, or B, they're going to see my real crazy. They're going to see the true me, and they are never going to want to be my friend again. And in all reality, everyone has their own version of chaos going on. And you can look into any of our houses at any given moment of any given day and be like, holy crap, that chick's crazy.
Right.
Or you could be like, oh my gosh, they
really got it all together. Yeah, there are moments when I have my stuff together.
So, we can't compare that, and we can't step into the role of God in each other's lives. Because if we jump in and try to fix each other's things, then you start building a codependent relationship, and the whole purpose of discipleship is that we are pointing each other back to God. There's no discipleship.
Well, I'm taking something from you, honestly, if I come in and fix it, I'm taking it from you.
Right.
Like, not in a good way. Like, I could be taking blessings from you, because sometimes you have to really go through some really bad things to get to where God wants you to be.
I am not the person I am today because I lived an easy life.
Right.
Like, some of my biggest growth came from the most terrible times in my life. And when I was in my darkest moments, I had women come alongside of me, and they didn't come alongside of me and be like, we're going to fix this or whatever. The darkest moment of my life, I remember Pastor Bob's wife, Carolyn, came over to my house, and she brought me chocolate, and she brought her Bible, and she's like, all right, here's some chocolate. This is going to make it better for a second. And then we're going to
the world release.
And then we are going to, like, what does God say about this? And then she prayed with me. That's all she did. There was no, well, what's wrong with you for this or anything like that. It was an acknowledgement. That's what the chocolate was. It was an acknowledgement of, I understand this sucks. Yeah. Like, here's some chocolate.
Because sometimes you do have to meet that some sort of physical need, with somebody to be like, okay. And sometimes it is just that physical presence of just showing up. Sometimes it's even just a question. I know I was having a meltdown moment, and I had a couple ladies from the church show up, and Catherine was one of them, and she showed up and she goes, what would happen if you finished any of these unfinished projects in your house? And I was like, what? She's like, what would happen if you finished it? Because I had like my front bathroom, which this is, okay, it's still half finished. I painted it again, Catherine, and it's still on. So I had painted my front bathroom in my house, and it wasn't done, and the trim wasn't done, it was just the walls. She's like, okay, your bathroom over here, what would happen if you actually finished it? I don't know. What do you mean by that question? She goes, well, would the world fall apart? No. Is anybody going to die if you finish the trim? Yeah. No. It would be done. She's like, yeah, exactly. It would be done. And I was like, oh, I could do that. And she was like, I'm going to bring you some stuff to paint your bathroom. So she brought me this little trimmer thing. But then I did paint it again, and it's not done again. So I guess I didn't learn. But it did. I do think of that now when I look at things that are unfinished, and I'm like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen if I don't get that finished? So I go and I do it. Yeah. So that helped. That was good. But that's what we were talking about, the comparison. So I think I lost what I was going to say, but it led really well into what we've learned over the last month personally, because there were some things that surprised me that God really brought to my attention over this last month, and in that struggle. So why don't we just jump into that, because I totally forgot what I was going to say.
Well, I think for me, the biggest thing is just that realization that, we don't have to have all the answers, but we also don't have to be the ones to always have the problem either.
Right.
And it's that balance. And that, I think, is when you truly know that you have found your people, is when there's an equal give and take, and that in every situation, you're talking about God, and you're going back, because there's been struggles all month long that it's like, and then I was reading this in my quiet time this morning, and God showed me this, and like, okay, I've really been struggling with this specific situation, and Brandi and I have kind of had the same struggle through it, and as we're sharing with each other, and not sharing with each other of, we're both struggling, so we're going to wallow in it, or we're both struggling, so we're going to, turn it into something bigger than it needs to be. But we're both struggling, we need to hold each other accountable in this. And as we're doing that, she shared something that God showed her in Scripture, and it was completely like, oh my gosh. And so then I was able to let my struggle go. And I think that's the thing, is, do you have people that are in the Word and will point you back to God? But then when you're struggling, they're not, what's wrong with you? Or, and you can be yourself, because when did you text me yesterday? I'm best in small doses. I think that's why the three of us can hang out together, because we all acknowledge we're not for everybody.
We're not for everyone.
And you know, and
I am best in small doses. I'm best in small doses for myself.
but you know, we laugh about it, but to me, it's like, I think that's why I've been able to let things go. And like, if someone, you know, I rub someone the wrong way, it's like, that's fine. You don't have to be friends with everyone. And I don't need everyone to like me. I spent a very long time trying to get people to like me. And
It's exhausting.
yeah, it's miserable.
Yeah.
And you're miserable. And so it was just so much more freeing just to be like, it's fine. And I acknowledge, I full on own, I'm better in small doses. And I get that. And that's not an excuse for me to just, you know, let my freak flag fly and, you know, not, I mean, there's self-control and all of those other.
We have the Spirit of God.
Yes, there's biblical things, responsibilities you have to take for yourself.
And there is denying your freak flag sometimes to honor Christ.
Yes, so that's not an excuse to just, you know, let it all out. But it is very freeing to know, like, I don't need everyone to like me. And it's very freeing to know if I share something with someone, and because I think we've all been there, you share something with someone and it's like, ooh, that was not the right person to share that with. I should not have.
Dear Lord, please last 15 minutes of conversation that we just had.
Yeah, and so it's very freeing to be like, it's fine. It's fine.
Because at the end of the day, it is what it is. And if it's really going on in its truth, and even if it gets into the wrong hands, you know, God is your defender.
Yeah.
And you know, whatever they do with that information or whatever they think, that's going to be between them and God anyway, at the end of the day. And I think that was something I had to learn in this journey of transparency. The more that God calls me to have a microphone in front of me, I would stand up on stage, you know, to lead worship, and they're going to be like, this is what we're going to share. And I'm like, oh, no, we're not. This is the entire church congregation. Now it's like the entire church congregation, and it's being recorded forever. You know? So, but I remember in that journey, like, there was a lot of, I was always good at sharing the past. Yes, this bad thing happened. This is what God did. Bam, done. I will share with you all day long about my past struggles, things I used to. That was always so easy because I'm not that person anymore. I don't struggle with it anymore. But if it's the thing that's going on right in this moment, that was the hardest thing to be able to. I mean, even up into the beginning of the month. I mean, sending that text was. And it's in there word for word. I just copied from my text message and dropped it into Facebook on the Come to the Table site. That was word for word. I was like, this is really hard for me to share. Like, I was like, I can't do this. And I probably sat there like, I'm not going to post. I can't send this to them. I go, what are they going to think? What are they? You know, you go through this whole thing. But it's like.
And honestly, we didn't think anything. We were like, oh, good, you too.
She's going down with us. We're all going to heaven together. So that, you know, but yeah, really at the end of the day, you know, there's that. But and for me, the struggle, if you look at between the first post that I posted, which is the one we've been talking about, and then the next one I posted, which was more of a relationship struggle that I've been having for a long time with certain people or whatever. But you know, in those 3 weeks, I went from, in the beginning, I really believed that you're either struggling or you're not. Mm-hmm. Then I couldn't figure out what's wrong with me because I'm always struggling. I'm like, I want to be in that not struggling, but it's always less struggling. I think it's like I always go from some level. Something's always a struggle. Yeah. I mean, even getting a red light when you're in a hurry to go to the bank or the post office and the guy in front of you slows really down to turn, and then you're like, oh, and now we missed the light. Like, that's a struggle. So there's those kind of struggles that we just kind of, you know, offshoot versus the big struggles when, you know, the big things that come at us. But my thinking it's like this either is or is not. Like there is no in between ground, and I need to get to this place, this destination of not struggling. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm always trying for. And I must be failing. I must be failing if I'm continuing to struggle.
In his blood, because that's the only way.
Right.
And then it finally gets that.
Yeah, and that's really when he's like, I'm here. Like, that's what you need. And if you just look for me, if you just take your eyes off of it, I always say that, but it's like, I get so busy and so distracted and so just going through the day in and day out, and then have moments of like, oh, I should probably be looking for Jesus in my day, you know. Now, I don't think I'm the only one, you know. I mean, I hear these things from people. You try to be like every moment focused on the Lord and everything, but that's a huge feat, I think.
Well, and I think realizing that everyone deals with struggle differently.
Yeah.
Everyone has their own way of dealing with it. You know, there's some people that I have to stay busy. I have to find something to do, and you know, and that's kind of that one devotional about like how the disciples handled the, you know, Holy Week and how Jesus, you know, was arrested and everything. Like, you know, some of them stood strong, some of them were there, but then like they kind of wavered. You know,
we don't even hear about, but you know they weren't right there.
Yeah, they ran off and we don't even know what they were doing. And then you know you have Judas who like took it so hard. You know, and so it's that realizing we don't all deal with things the same.
Right.
And so I think sometimes that's where the enemy gets in there. He has us compare our struggles. He tries to keep us from being able to be honest with each other. But then when someone is dealing with a struggle, we also judge the way they're dealing with it.
Right.
Because, well, you're not dealing with that in the way that you should be. Well, God created everyone differently, and I mean, you look all through Scripture, and you know, there's people who dealt with things poorly, and you know, and it's that there's been times where I've struggled and I've dealt with it very poorly, but then you learn, and you learn from that, and so not being down on yourself when you get to a point where it's just like, I did not handle that the most graceful way I should have, being able to move on from that. But then also acknowledging, like, this is what's healthy for me, and I need to be careful that I don't go into this unhealthy place.
Right.
Because I very much am I need to do something, but I can very easily go past that point to the unhealthy point of I'm struggling, and so everything else is chaos. So I need to do something. So I am going to overly micromanage this part of my life because all of this is chaos and I can't control it, but I can control this little piece.
And Melissa and I close the door.
We'll find me in my closet in the dark, going, I don't want to do this anymore. Nobody's in here. I don't know where Mom went. She's gone.
But it's just that acknowledgement that everyone's different, and thank God for that.
Yes.
Because I mean, quite frankly, do we all want a world of people like me? Probably not. You know, and I mean, thank God everyone is different.
Yeah, and everybody's had different life experiences and has different things going on, and I think it's really. It really just lands us right back into that comparison and that judgment of, you know, how do you come alongside of each other and help that person do what's healthy for them, you know, and what's God honoring for them.
Well, like that makes me think about Rachel and Leah. So that's huge comparison. I could not imagine living like that. Like, you know, oh, you're the pretty, wonderful one. I'm the sucky sister that he got tricked into marrying.
Have some vegetables.
And I don't know, of course I'm not going to know the exact words, but when Rachel finally got to the point of saying, I will be praying for Leah to continue Jacob's line and have those babies, I'm fine with that, that's when her life changed. And it was not looking in at herself, because I'm sure for a very long time it was,
that's me. This is my world. It's my story, and we are just so self-centered, and that's, you know, James. If you want to have a good conviction day, just read the book of James. But you know, he says, why do you have these, you know, these struggles? And it's because your selfish desires. And it's like, wow, that is just so like heart-wrenching that But God says, if you delight in me, I will give you the desires of your heart. And we know that, when you delight in God and God is your focus, that the desires of your heart change and you become more Christ-like. But I also think there's something to that in the way that God has created all of us. Like he has implanted within each of us these unique desires to fulfill his purpose. And when we line those up with the Spirit and we line those up in delighting in him, he brings forth that fruit into our lives. And it's not to say that all the struggle goes away, because we know very clearly that in this world we will have many struggles. But he says, rest assured, have peace, and know that I have come to overcome these struggles. I have overcome them. Like it's done, and they're overcome. And having knowing that, and then being able to walk in the everyday struggles, and just knowing that he is there, that he has a plan. And, the Bible doesn't say that he won't give us more than we can handle, but he won't give us more than what he's going to show us how to get through and be there with us and hold us through. And I think we misunderstand that verse so often that we think, well, it's got to be what I can. No, it's not more than he can handle. But it's not, he won't give you more, he won't allow you to be tempted more than what he can. He will show you the way out, and he will hold you through all of that.
Well, and maybe you have to be seeking him, or it can be way more than you can handle.
Well, and I think that's a great way to end, is just with the conversation of how do you get to that point where you are seeking him? Because if your way of what does God say about struggle, and you just Google that, you're gonna have you're gonna get the prosperity gospel of well, if God's gonna have you struggle, he'll bless you back twofold. And
there's a lot of different types of messages out there.
Exactly.
Things that you need to do, little boxes you need to check. I'm just trying to think of some of the things that I've seen in Googling.
But it's that, God won't give you more than you can handle. Well,
but what happens when you're facing something more than you can handle?
I'm sorry. He sent Jesus to the cross, and we have a scripture that says
that was more than he can handle.
If you have a plan B, it's
blood dripping from the forehead. Great time to enact plan B. I don't know. Blood has never dripped from my forehead unless I cut my head open, not because of stress.
We have to be very careful, and I think the biggest thing is even before you go to someone that you trust, have you prayed about it, and are you in your word? Not Google searching stuff, but your actual word, the actual Bible. Are you in that? And yes, you can, look up in the concordance, whatever you're struggling with or whatever, but there is so much beauty in God's word. It says that his word is alive and active in us. It's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. He can take a story that you've read a million times and show you something about your struggle in that story that you never would have been able to think of. Christmas is coming up, and as we've been praying over Christmas, God gave me this beautiful picture of, right now everyone's struggling. We don't know if we can do Christmas, with families. Here at Grace, we're not able to do an in-person Christmas service.
People have lost jobs. I don't know how they're going to afford to get gifts and stuff like that.
There's a whole big thing. And God gave me this beautiful picture of, that first Christmas, it was just Mary and Joseph and God. And that's all they needed. And it was beautiful and it was perfect. And we have made it more than what it needs to be.
And their idea would have been the inn, can we have a room in a heated building?
And can we, even if you go further into that,
whatever they use before their fireplace, there we go. I'm that didn't sound right.
Even if you go further into that, the men of that day were not in the delivery room. The women of the village would come and help. And so, you have Joseph, who, him and Mary.
He wasn't a chef, but he's a he had to deliver a live chalk.
He's a carpenter. Exactly. So,
That's true, yeah.
It was just them, and there was a struggle, and I'm sure it was chaotic, and there was fear, but it was simple, and it was beautiful. And I have read the birth of Christ story 1,004 times, and never once did I see that until we're going through this COVID struggle.
And it's funny, the same thing God was showing me, that it's not going to look the way, it's never going to look the way we think it should look, because it's not meant to be what we want it to be.
You think that's how Mary wanted to give birth?
Birth plan?
Yeah, it was 5 years from that moment. She's like, so we're going to get married, and then we'll spend 2 years working on us. And then we'll start having children. Yeah, but yeah, that's so beautiful. And I think that is, there's just a great way. How are you encountering Jesus? Because I don't have any other answer of how do you go through the struggle? How do you do this? There's no like these 3 steps, do this. Like how are you encountering Jesus today? How are you encountering Jesus in the midst of your struggle? And how are you encountering Jesus every day so that when struggle rises, you are able to hear him say, I'm here.
Yeah.
Because it's not that I haven't heard, God say a whole bunch of things, to me, but but there's just moments where he's like, you need to hear me. And like so much goes so much better when it's a daily. When daily I'm in relationship with him, whatever that looks like. It isn't like you have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and you have to read 6 chapters in the Bible and you have to mark off your plan and then go do this and go to this. And it doesn't look like that. It's what is right for you in the way that your life works, in the way that you meet. How are you putting God first? How are you encountering Jesus daily?
Exactly.
Yeah, because it's not happening at 5 for me.
and something that God really showed me, I don't know that it really has anything to do with struggle, but it happened over this last month, was that I've questioned a lot of times whether it was God or not. Was that God? Was he telling me to go here? Should I do this? Should I not do that? Maybe he wants me. Does he want us to do this? And I feel like I hear that a lot from people. They're like, I just don't know if it was God or not. But I can boldly 100% say that I've never questioned it when it was God. So that kind of, I don't know, I was doing something and God just showed that to me and I was like, I have never questioned once when you spoke to me. And so all those other times I was questioning.
Well, the biggest question that we don't ask people, because we throw that around a lot, God told me, God told me, God showed me, God showed me. And the biggest question I've ever been asked that makes you stop and think is, how did he affirm that in you? How did he affirm that in you? And I saw a thing, one of my Facebook friends had posted something, I think it was Kelly Hunick, and she said, it was a quote from someone, and it was talking about like, when things get confusing, that's fine, because God didn't send the angels to Joseph until after Mary and Joseph had already talked. So Mary had already gone to Joseph and said, hey, I'm pregnant, and by the way, it's God.
Great conversation.
Could you imagine? Oh my God.
God didn't send the angels to prepare Joseph for that conversation. He sent them to affirm. Mary came to Joseph, and then the angels affirmed it. And so how does God affirm things to you?
Sometimes it takes a long time because we're very quick. We want instant gratification. So God told me I am supposed to do an 800 kid VBS. Well, I might get a little ahead of myself there on that.
Right.
Just this.
Yeah.
Come to the table. I mean, this is what, 4 years that we've been discussing, and I promise you, it looked nothing like this.
No, not at all.
No, like
Where's the pink food?
Right? I'm the foodie. I'm still waiting for dinner. It's coming.
And so, it evolves over time. But honestly, if God would have showed us 4 years ago, the 3 of you are going to sit at this table for 2 weeks.
You want me to sit by the lady that's always dressed up? I'm going to have to dress up.
Even like yesterday, Brandy's like, so I don't have to come to the table, right? No, we need you at the table.
I'm never coming to the table.
I'm not going to talk after
I'm not going to talk.
But if God would have showed us 4 years ago when the tiny idea of this came to be, that this is what this would be, it would have been overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so I think it's that we had to struggle to get to this point. We had to go through things, we had to try things and it wouldn't work, and we had to get to this point. And so I think, to move past your struggles, you have to be in your word, you have to be praying. And then you need to find someone that you can trust. And I think if you don't have someone, I think I said this last month, but I mean, the three of us sitting at this table, we have experienced divorce, the loss of a child,
infertility,
mixed
alcoholism,
families,
drugs, abuse. I don't know what else could we go.
Jail.
I've never been to jail. I don't know about these other ladies. Sorry. Be careful of the company.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
Infidelity. I mean, the list could go on and on and on.
Yeah.
And
because there is nothing that is not common to man that Christ didn't face, and I think that's where we miss. We go straight to, okay, well, Jesus walked on the earth and Jesus faced all of these things, but we miss what he's saying in there. They're common to man. They're common. It's commonplace. You're not the only one. And how many decisions and things do we do thinking we're the only one and in isolation because we don't want anybody to know?
And how many times, I think there was an evening where you and I were talking, and I just randomly brought up a past struggle that I had, and it wasn't something like I walk around and be like, hey, by the way, this happened.
Right.
To just anyone. It's something that, but I felt like at that moment I needed to share that, and you're like, me too.
Right.
And it was that,
yeah.
You never know what's going on in someone's life, and that's the beautiful thing about that relationship and that fellowship that God calls us to have as Christians is that, this is why we have church. Yes. It is not the music, it is not the ministries, it is not the message. It's this. He gives us this because could you imagine trying to walk through this life
without the Me Too?
Yeah.
That's right. You just said that, and I know the conversation you're talking about, and that as a perfect place to end is the Me Too. That right there. I don't even know what else to say on that. Just that you need to be in relationship with who can say. And that's what God, honestly, another verse, he says he works all things for good for those who love him. But that good so often is the good that comes from me or you being able to say, me too. Because there's so much relief and so much, it's like carrying the burden. It's like when Christ says that his yoke is light and that he's just laid on me so much this month. Just the burden is light. My yoke is light. And I think a lot of the reason why it is light is because he gives you people to be in fellowship with, to come alongside and say me too.
Mm-hmm.
I like